Good day, folks. This Sunday, gloomy day, announcements of the elections, big news. Start covering that next week. But I close in here, folks, on essentially on tough boy image, geopolitics, where we seem to have lost our verve in the hurly-burly of domestic politics. Now let's look at what's happening in the SAARC region. Having covered the good moves that India has made in the new Quad, old Quad amongst the Central Asian nations, let's see what's happening with SAARC and this is reflective, as Prabhash Ranjan writes, the crisis in SAU, the crisis of SAARC. He says today, 36 years after SAARC came into existence and 24 years after the GEP report, SAARC's lofty goals of economic integration remain a pipe dream. The SAFTA agreement that came into being in 2004 has been a spectacular failure. The roots of the economic debacle lie in the political dysfunctionality of SAARC, especially in the last 5 years. Pakistan has often played the role of an obstructionist in SAARC, and that includes China. An institution that best captures the debilitating nature of SAARC despite its tremendous potential is the New Delhi-based South Asian University. SAU was set up in 2010 by SAARC, guess by which government, folks, as an international university with the ambition of becoming the center of excellence. So all those guys who think about the moves are made by good old Modi, gotta rethink, man, a lot of moves are made by the previous government, including the relationship with the United States. In short, the bureaucratic inertia and differences that have plagued SAARC for long are chipping away at one of the most audacious experiments in South Asian regional cooperation. The future of SAARC and specialized bodies such as SAU is directly proportional to India's political interest in this project. Notwithstanding Pakistan's recalcitrant attitude, India should remember that SAARC is still best suited to serve its strategic interests in the region. In this regard, SAU can be extremely important instrument to boost India's soft power. The students who graduate from SAU can become brand ambassadors for India, positively influencing India's diplomatic relations with its neighbors in the long run. But yeah, so I'm going to start with two countries, right? Short ones who are in bed with China for sure. One is Nepal. Nepal again rakes up border row, stakes claims through 3 Uttarakhand villages, but Nepal should be very wary and see what's happening in Sri Lanka as an example. See what's happening in Sri Lanka, man. They are up a creek without a paddle, up a creek in the shit creek, right? Sri Lanka PM on Tirupati pilgrimage. So this Buddhist needs to go to Tirupati. Why? India conducts drill with Lanka, Maldives and maritime security. More on that later, but here's this. Lanka seeks 1.5 billion Indian credit line to tide over crisis. Why? Hey, pray why, man? You've given us up. You've been showing us the finger, poking us in the eye, and now you want 1.5 billion. Food prices in Sri Lanka hit record high of 22% in December as shortages bite. Lanka finally readies oil tank farm deal with India. Vying to visit Colombo after spat may offer sweeteners, okay? Lankan lynched by mob in Pakistan for alleged blasphemy, so that buddy is not doing too well. Trincomalee oil tank deal, a result of 30 years of Indo-Lankan effort. Okay, the Indian-Sri Lanka deal to jointly redevelop the Trincomalee oil tank farm signed on Thursday, the eve of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's Colombo visit, is a result of an arduous effort undertaken by the two neighbors over the last 3 decades, and an equally arduous effort taken over by Rajapaksa and his people and China to make sure it doesn't happen. But Lankan MP accuses Beijing of pushing Colombo into debt trap. Lanka bank pays 6.9 million to China company amid fertilizer. Oh, twisted their tails. Lanka rations electricity as dollar crisis worsens. Why aren't they using the Chinese currency, Mr. Rajapaksa? True trusted friend Maldives government rejects campaign targeting India. Maldives also better be careful because the Yameen keeps coming up. Yameen, right? Maldives hits out at ex-president India out campaign. All eyes on Chinese foreign minister Malay visit, right? Okay. Then India conducts drill with Lanka, Maldives on maritime security. We got to secure this area, folks. We got to secure Maldives. Sri Lanka, like I'd always said, let it burn, let it reap its own harvest. The seeds it's sown with China. It's up to them, folks. They think they're just too cool. They let us down as far as Rajiv Gandhi was concerned. Let's be really clear about this. In Sri Lanka, the people that matter are the Tamilians. We've got to ensure their interest foremost. More later. So after Sri Lanka, let's protect our east, which is the most faithful, or what we say, closest ally at this time in our SAARC region is Bangladesh. And this being the 1971, that was the anniversary, the 25th, no, the anniversary of the 1971 war. This is already 50th year anniversary. It's critical because Bangladesh would not have been there without India and Indira Gandhi and all that, right? Train service between Siliguri and Dhaka to begin soon, says Shringla. Delhi Dhaka, a model for the neighborhood. The relationship has its roots in history, but both states have ensured continuous engagement, crucial for contemporary South Asian relations. He says President Ramnath Kovind was on a state visit to Bangladesh from December 15th to 17th. His visit to attend Bangladesh 50th Vijay Divos served two purposes. First, it reflected the historical roots that interconnect India and Bangladesh. Second, it reflects the new realities of a deepening, special and ideal relationship between the two states. These gestures were reflective of India and Bangladesh's mutual struggles against Pakistan, India's hosting of 10 million refugees, equipping and training the Mukti Bahini, and fighting a war against Pakistan are just some of the sacrifices it undertook while liberating Bangladesh. I don't think they'll forget. This invite also underlines Bangladesh's interest in further deepening its relationship with India. But what's a cause of worry is this, is what Subir Bhaumik writes. Renewed US hostility towards Sheikh Hasina should worry India. It does. On December 15th, India Foreign Secretary Shringla said that India-Bangladesh ties have reached a high point. He's correct. However, India cannot look the other way when the United States seems to be going all out to haul up Sheikh Hasina government. The American hostility became evident when Washington did not invite Bangladesh to the Democracy Summit while it invited Pakistan. Dubious. The US action can encourage fresh agitation by Islamist opposition in Bangladesh. India cannot afford US action unchallenged in its eastern neighborhood, which can unsettle a close ally and harm Indian interests substantially. Hasina has comprehensively addressed India's security and connectivity concerns by cracking down against northeastern rebels and allowing use of its ports and transit to northeast. So after the Afghan debacle, Delhi cannot afford a double whammy from Uncle Sam, and this is one place, again, we should stand up to Uncle Sam just like we did in 1971, folks, and actually work towards changing the attitude. We need to do that both for Bangladesh and for Myanmar. So guys, hot Nespresso in my hand. Let's see why the other country in the East becomes critical. As written by Rajiv Bhatia, a delicate but necessary mission to Myanmar. He says the goals of the current visit are not difficult to fathom. Several recent developments have necessitated a high-level dialogue with Naypyidaw. First, the fatal attack on Colonel Viplav Tripathi, his wife and their infant son, together with 4 other men of the Assam Rifles in an ambush on November 13, demonstrated the reinvigoration of insurgent activity along the Indian-Myanmar border. Insurgent outfits, the PLA and the MNPF involved in smuggling operations are known to be behind this attack. Second, the influx of thousands of people escaping army oppression to seek shelter in Mizoram continues. So does the pressure by the Mizoram government on Delhi to allocate resources for meeting their needs. He says the most delicate aspect of Shringla's mission is to execute and project the dual-track policy, refurbish time-tested ties of cooperation with the military while extending clear support for the cause of democracy. And the road to Naypyidaw, as written by Harsh Pant. He says, while the West continues to condemn and sanction, China is investing and pulling Myanmar into its orbit. The US has continued to use the overused threat of ever more sanctions, though to little avail. Myanmar's army seems to have ceased bothering about the rhetoric from the West. It's important to note, right? It's a, law of diminishing returns. It is therefore imperative that New Delhi too reaches out and shapes its own trajectory in Myanmar. Having seen what happened in Afghanistan, we need to do this both in Dhaka and in Naypyidaw. The complexity of India's regional security and neighborhood demands that India adopt a more nuanced position on Myanmar. New Delhi should not lose its essential pragmatism in engaging Myanmar. So that's what we have. India, disturbed over Suu Kyi's conviction, calls for a dialogue with Myanmar. India pitches for Myanmar's early return to democracy. India wants Myanmar to restore democracy, said in Rezul Laskar. Unlike the West, India can't isolate Myanmar due to geopolitical reasons. The show can't. Myanmar cozies up to China with infra overtures. It just makes no sense, right? Foreign Secretary to visit Myanmar security situation on agenda. 5 dead after Myanmar security forces ram car into Yangon protesters, says report. China views Myanmar with old SAR. Who's the old SAR going to be used for, folks? Not against its ASEAN neighbors. Is it going to be used against India? Is it going to be used against Bangladesh? That's the only choice there is, folks. So why the sub to Myanmar? Why the sub to Myanmar? Pakistan seems to be left with holding a very few set of cards, except if India gives it a breather with its domestic politics, exactly what happened in Punjab. Especially in the Gulf, it's really lost its plot, right? Eyes on Gulf job market, government to launch upskill project for overseas workers. So there's a close knitting that's developing between the UAE, Israel, and India, right? Justice long overdue in Mumbai attacks is US finally is at least turning some kind of heat on to Pakistan. Cash trap Pakistan to get 3 billion from Saudi. Pakistan ex-chief of tax revenue body says nation bankrupt, raises question on CPEC. Pakistan opens upgraded airport in Gilgit and Baltistan. That's again a China play. Afghanistan, Taliban stop Pak army from fencing international border. US authorized certain transactions for Afghanistan, but India is on board. Mob attacks. Pakistan police fails to grab blasphemy suspect. 2 Pakistan soldiers killed in militant attack near Afghanistan border. Pakistan summons top Indian diplomat over hate speech and dharam censor. This is what I mean by Indian domestic politics, which could play into Pakistan's hand. Pakistan claims fall flat as no Kashmir mentioned in UN resolution. Is climbing a steep slope, folks. As Pakistan marks 7th anniversary of school attacks, parents slam PM for TTP talks. TTP declare end to ceasefire. In first attack since end of truce, TTP fighters kill cop on polio duty. Oh, there it goes. OIC meet on Afghanistan concludes without any pledge for aid. So Pakistan has lost the plot. Why? Pakistan sparks uproar in Afghanistan over IS terror remark. And why it's lost the plot is because of this. Taliban 9/11 families fight for billions frozen in Afghan funds. And what Pakistan had promised Afghanistan, what Afghanistan had hoped to get from Pakistan was these funds would be released, but because they're in China's camp and because they're in Pakistan's camp, it ain't happening, folks. It ain't happening. So, Afghans and the Taliban seem to be shooting themselves in the foot, and the reasons are no trips to Afghan women without male chaperones. So Taliban, Western nations blast Taliban over summary killings. 2 blast hits Kabul Shia areas, no clarity on casualties. UN says Taliban rule marked by killing, denial of women rights. Terrorists enjoy free pass in Pakistan, says India. IS claims responsibility for 2 blasts in Kabul. No need for their existent Taliban dissolve Afghanistan election bodies. Taliban issue posters that order women to cover up. So that's it, folks. Shooting themselves in the foot with no help from Pakistan and Iran. Recent events suggest that India, despite all the odds, is back in play and is a player in, may not be the major player, but player in Afghanistan. And this is important to note from what Avinash Paliwal writes, decoding the Delhi Declaration. He says, 1, the dialogue seeks to message those Taliban factions marginalized in Kabul that checking the powerful Sirajuddin Haqqani and by corollary Pakistan is essential for the survival. 2, counter to intuition, Russia, Iran and Central Asian republics are more worried about the situation than India. That's important. Issued just before the Troika plus China, Pakistan, Russia and United States meeting in Islamabad and after a series of dialogues from which India was excluded, the declaration seeks to pressure Pakistan into accepting a genuine power sharing arrangement in Kabul. It strengthens Moscow's hand in relation to Islamabad and Beijing, both of whom are at odds with Russia and Iran's vision of inclusivity. Moscow's unilateral statement on the dialogue indicates that it is open to utilizing the India card in Islamabad for what it's worth. All right. India did well to time the dialogue just before the Troika Plus meet in announcing humanitarian aid for the people of Afghanistan, channelizing the concerns of Kabul's non-Pakistani neighbors, and shaping international diplomacy from the outside where it does enjoy considerable capital. So we say India back in play in Afghanistan, recent efforts play key role, EU Special Envoy. After Taliban takeover, India sends first tranche of medical aid to Kabul. Taliban thank India for med aid, says ties are very vital. Taliban look to balance ties with India and Pakistan. Iran-Pakistan rivalry in Afghanistan works for India. It certainly does, as you saw from the Carr statement. Ready to deliver urgent grain medicines to Afghanistan, says India. Grains have been stocked by none other than a Muslim country to a Muslim country, Pakistan. India-based SAIF, seen as leader of anti-Taliban front. If that's true, it's in play. Pakistan meet over US Special Envoy for Afghanistan to visit India today. So like everything is India's, right? India lists as priority to Biden's new Afghan envoy. India, China, Russia call for an inclusive government in Afghanistan, but China is basically playing Pakistan's side. Afghanistan vote brings to fore India's differences with China and Russia. It always will. India, France seek concerted action against terror outfits LET Al-Qaeda. France, Europeans working to open joint mission in Afghanistan, says Macron. UN defers decision on Afghanistan. A lot of this India is doing, right? India votes for UNSC resolution on easing curbs on aid to Afghanistan. So Afghanistan needs us. Taliban to be invited to third ministerial meet on Afghanistan in China, says Pakistan. That's what's left, right? Pakistan FM bankrupt with a begging bowl. UAE in talks with Taliban to run Kabul airport, says diplomat. This is advantage India because UAE is a strategic partner for India and Pakistan is in the shit list as far as UAE is concerned. And this is the other important part is our CAR, Central Asian regions, nations. India, Russia discuss joint defense production in Central Asia, folks. All this is in play. India is definitely a player in Afghanistan for all those naysayers, but we are there, right? Cheers and Jai Hind.